Marlene Prescott clutched the crinkled newspaper clipping to her chest as the stagecoach rattled over the dusty Montana terrain, each jolt sending her heart racing faster than the horses, pulling them westward. The year was 1875, and at 22 years old, she had done what everyone in her small Pennsylvania town deemed unthinkable: answered a matrimonial advertisement from a cowboy she'd never met. "You're making a terrible mistake," her mother had wept the morning she departed. "You'll be murdered by savages or worse, married to some brute who'll work you to death." Her father had been more direct. Only a fool would travel 2,000 miles to marry a stranger. The memory made Marlene's eyes sting, but she blinked away the tears. She'd memorized the advertisement word for word. Rancher seeks bride. Must be hardy, honest, and willing to build a life in Montana territory. Photograph appreciated, but character valued most. She'd been the only one to respond, according to the telegram she'd received confirming her journey. That thought alone terrified her. What kind of man couldn't find a wife closer to home? The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside a weathered building with a sign reading, Silver Creek Station. Marlene gathered her single trunk containing everything she owned and stepped down into the blinding sunlight. "Miss Prescott." A deep voice called from the shadow of the station's porch. She squinted, making out the silhouette of a tall man leaning against a post. As her eyes adjusted, details emerged: broad shoulders beneath a worn leather vest, a strong jawline darkened with stubble, and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Mr. Quinn?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the departing stagecoach. "Wade Quinn," he confirmed, approaching with long strides. He stopped a respectful distance away, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "Welcome to Silver Creek." He wasn't what she'd expected. The hard lines of his face suggested a man in his early 30s who'd lived a difficult life, but his eyes were kind. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, straightening her spine despite her exhaustion. Wade nodded, studying her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "The journey must have been difficult." "Not as difficult as staying where I was," she replied honestly. Something flickered across his face, understanding, perhaps before he gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. "My ranch is 15 miles out. We should get moving if we want to arrive before dark." As Wade loaded her trunk, Marlene felt the curious stares of townspeople. A woman emerged from the general store, nudging her companion and whispering loudly enough for Marlene to hear. "That's Quinn's mail order bride. Can you imagine? Traveling all this way to marry a man she's never met." "Poor thing," her companion replied. "She clearly doesn't know what she's getting into." Wade's jaw tightened as he helped Marlene onto the wagon seat. "People talk," he said simply. "You'll get used to it." "I'm accustomed to being talked about," she answered, smoothing her travel-worn skirt. "Though I had hoped for a warmer welcome." "Silver Creek isn't known for its hospitality to strangers," Wade replied, flicking the reins to set the horses in motion. "But the land makes up for the people." As they left town behind, Marlene was struck by the vastness of the Montana landscape. Rolling prairies stretched toward distant mountains, painted gold by the afternoon sun. The beauty took her breath away. "It's magnificent," she whispered. Wade glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. "Most Easterners find it overwhelming." "I find it freeing," she admitted. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic creak of the wagon wheels punctuating the space between them. Finally, Wade cleared his throat. "I should tell you about the ranch before we arrive. It's not what you might expect." Marlene braced herself. Here it came, the revelation that would confirm her family's worst fears. "I have 200 acres, mostly grazing land. The house isn't large, but I built it myself. There's a barn, a corral, and about 60 head of cattle." He paused. "And there's my brother." "Your brother?" This hadn't been mentioned in his letters. "William. He's 18. Lost his leg in an accident 2 years ago. He helps with what he can, but..." Wade's knuckles whitened on the reins. That's partly why I needed someone. The confession hung between them. You needed help, Marlene stated, understanding dawning. Wade nodded, his profile rigid against the setting sun. I should have been clearer in my advertisement. If you want to return to town, I'll arrange passage back east. Marlene considered his offer. She thought of the life she'd left working in her father's dry goods store, enduring the pitying glances of neighbors who whispered about the spinster Prescott girl, whose fiancé had jilted her for her younger sister. Mr. Quinn, she said firmly, I came west for a new beginning. I'm not afraid of hard work or challenges. Wade's shoulders relaxed slightly. Call me Wade, he said. If we're to be married, formality seems unnecessary. And I'm Marlene, she replied, offering a small smile. When do you think the wedding should be? Wade's expression shifted. I thought perhaps we might get to know each other first. The parson only comes through every few weeks. Relief and something like respect flickered through Marlene. That seems sensible. As the wagon crested a rise, Wade pointed ahead. There it is. Quinn Ranch. Below them, nestled in a valley beside a winding creek, stood a sturdy log house with smoke curling from its chimney. A barn and several outbuildings formed a neat compound, surrounded by split-rail fencing. It wasn't grand, but it was solid and well-maintained. It's lovely, Marlene said sincerely. Wade shot her a skeptical glance. It's humble. It's a home, she countered. That's more than many have. As they approached, the front door opened, and a young man hobbled out onto the porch, leaning heavily on a wooden crutch. His resemblance to Wade was striking, though his features were unmarked by the years of responsibility that had shaped his older brother's face. You must be Miss Prescott, William called as Wade helped her down from the wagon. I was beginning to think my brother had invented you. William, Wade warned, but Marlene laughed. I assure you I'm quite real, though perhaps a bit travel-worn, she replied, extending her hand. Please call me Marlene. William's grip was firm. Welcome to Quinn Ranch, Marlene. I hope you don't mind, but I've prepared supper. Nothing fancy, just rabbit stew and biscuits. The simple meal turned out to be delicious, eaten at a sturdy table in the ranch house's main room. Marlene observed her surroundings surreptitiously. The interior was plain but clean, with a stone fireplace, several bookcases filled with well-worn volumes, and handmade furniture that spoke of skill and care. After supper, Wade showed Marlene to a small bedroom off the main living area. This was our mother's sewing room, he explained. We've fixed it up for you until arrangements are settled. The consideration touched her. Thank you. We rise early, Wade said, his hand on the doorknob. But rest as long as you need tomorrow. The journey must have been exhausting. Alone in the small room, Marlene unpacked her few belongings. She placed her mother's silver-backed hairbrush on the simple dresser beside a photograph of her parents, the only mementos she'd brought of her old life. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. The unfamiliar sounds of the prairie night coyotes calling in the distance, the whisper of wind through grass kept her alert. Around midnight, she heard soft conversation from the main room. Curious, she crept to her door and listened. She seems nice, William was saying. She seems frightened, Wade replied. What was I thinking, bringing an Eastern woman out here? You were thinking you needed help, and she answered, William said reasonably. Besides, she doesn't strike me as easily frightened. You didn't see how people looked at her in town. Wade's voice hardened. Henderson's wife called her a fool right to her face. Since when do you care what people in town think? I don't, Wade insisted. But she might. No woman wants to be ridiculed. Maybe give her a chance to decide that for herself, William suggested. She came all this way, after all. Marlene retreated to her bed, Wade's concern both warming and troubling her. She hadn't expected tenderness from this weathered rancher. It complicated things. Morning came with pale light filtering through the calico curtains. Marlene dressed quickly in her plainest dress and pulled her hair into a simple knot. When she emerged, Wade was already gone, but William sat at the table drinking coffee. "Morning," he greeted her cheerfully. "Coffee's hot, and there's cornbread and honey." "Thank you," she said, accepting the mug he offered. "Where's your brother?" "Checking on a heifer that's about to calve," William explained. "He'll be back mid-morning." Marlene nodded, sipping the strong coffee. "What can I help with today?" William looked surprised. "You don't need to work your first day here." "I didn't come to be idle," she replied firmly. A slow smile spread across William's face. "Wade said you might say that. The garden could use tending. We've let it go a bit since." He gestured to his missing leg. "I'd be happy to help with the garden," Marlene said. "And perhaps you could tell me more about the ranch while we work." Over the next few hours, as Marlene weeded the neglected vegetable garden, William told her about Quinn Ranch, how their parents had homesteaded the land 20 years earlier, how Wade had taken over when their father died of pneumonia 5 years ago, and how an accident with a frightened horse had cost William his leg. Wade blamed himself, William confided as he sat on a stool, sorting seed packets. "He was breaking the horse when it threw me. That's why he's so." He searched for the word. "Cautious," Marlene suggested. "Closed off," William corrected. "He used to laugh more." Wade returned shortly before noon, looking tired but pleased. "Healthy bull calf," he announced, then stopped short seeing Marlene in the garden, her sleeves rolled up and dirt smudging her cheek. "Miss Prescott, you shouldn't be, Marlene," she reminded him, straightening up. "And I wanted to help. The garden was neglected." Wade looked from the neat rows she'd restored to his brother's grinning face. "I see William has been keeping you company." "Your brother has been telling me about the ranch," she confirmed. "It's impressive what you've built here." Something in Wade's expression softened. "It's not much compared to Eastern standards." "I'm not in the East anymore," she reminded him. That afternoon, Wade showed Marlene around the property. She listened attentively as he explained the seasonal rhythms of ranching, the calving in spring, branding in early summer, haying in late summer, and the cattle drive to the railroad in autumn. "It's constant work," he admitted as they watched the cattle grazing in a distant pasture. "Never ending." "All worthwhile things require effort," Marlene observed. Wade studied her face. "What made you answer my advertisement?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. "I wanted a new beginning," she said after a moment. "Most women would seek that closer to home." Marlene looked away. "Sometimes home becomes a cage." Wade didn't press further, but his gaze lingered on her profile. "Supper will be ready soon," he said finally. "We should head back." Days stretched into a week as Marlene settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She took over the cooking and housekeeping, planted new vegetables in the garden, and even helped William organize the ranch's accounts, discovering she had a talent for bookkeeping that impressed both brothers. "Where did you learn to keep ledgers like this?" Wade asked one evening as she balanced columns of figures by lamplight. "My father's store," she explained. "He insisted I learn, though he never let me manage the accounts." "His loss," Wade commented, the simple praise warming her more than it should have. On Sunday, Wade announced they would attend church in Silver Creek. "People should see you're being treated properly," he explained awkwardly. "Stop the gossip." Marlene wore her best dress, a blue calico, with white piping, and pinned her honey-brown hair in a style more elaborate than her usual practical knot. When she emerged from her room, Wade stared, his usual composure slipping. "You look lovely," he said quietly. The church service proved uncomfortable. People stared and whispered, and afterward, few approached to welcome her. One exception was the blacksmith's wife, Helen Turner, who introduced herself warmly. "Don't mind the others," Helen advised. They're just surprised Wade Quinn finally found himself a bride. Most had given up on him ever marrying. We haven't actually married yet, Marlene clarified. Helen's eyebrows rose. Living under the same roof unwed? That's progressive even for the frontier. His brother is always present, Marlene defended, feeling her cheeks heat. Mr. Quinn has been a perfect gentleman. I'm sure he has, Helen said with a knowing smile. Wade Quinn is many things, but dishonorable isn't one of them. Still, tongues will wag until you make it official. The ride home was silent, Wade's expression thunderous. When they arrived, he helped her down from the wagon with careful hands. I apologize for the reception you received, he said stiffly. It's not your fault, Marlene assured him. It is, he insisted. I should have considered how it would look, bringing you here without immediate marriage. Are you proposing we marry right away? Marlene asked directly. Wade's eyes widened. That is. Because if you are, she continued, heart pounding, I would prefer you actually ask me properly, rather than marrying me to silence gossip. Something shifted in Wade's expression, respect, perhaps, or admiration. You're right, he said softly. You deserve better than that. That night, after William had retired, Wade approached Marlene as she sat by the fire mending one of his shirts. May I join you? He asked formally. She nodded, setting aside her sewing. Wade sat in the chair opposite, his large frame making the furniture seem small. I realized something today, he began. When I placed that advertisement, I was looking for practical help, someone to cook and clean and help with the accounts. But you've become more than that in a very short time. Marlene's heart quickened. Have I? You've brought life back to this place, Wade continued, his eyes never leaving her face. William smiles more. The house feels like a home again. And I find myself. He hesitated. I find myself looking forward to each day in a way I haven't in years. Wade, she said softly. I'm not asking you to marry me out of convenience anymore, he said, his voice low and intense. I'm asking because I believe we could build something good together. Something real. The proposal hung between them, honest and unadorned. Marlene thought of her life before the humiliation of being jilted, the suffocating pity of her small town. And she thought of the past week, the satisfaction of hard work, William's brotherly teasing, and the way Wade looked at her when he thought she wouldn't notice. I need time, she said finally. Not long, but I need to be sure. Wade nodded, disappointment visible but acceptance stronger. Take all the time you need. I won't pressure you. The following day brought unexpected drama. Marlene was hanging laundry when a rider approached at a gallop. It was Helen Turner, the blacksmith's wife, her face pinched with worry. Marlene, thank goodness. Is Wade here? He's checking fences with William. What's wrong? Raiders hit the Marshall place last night, Helen explained breathlessly. Stole cattle and burned the barn. Jeb Marshall was shot trying to stop them. Is he alive? Marlene asked, horrified. Barely. Doc Simmons is with him. Helen glanced nervously toward the horizon. The men are forming a posse. We need every able hand. I'll find Wade, Marlene promised, already untying one of the horses from the corral. She'd never ridden alone before, but necessity drove her. Following Wade's instructions from their tour of the property, she found the brothers repairing a section of fence in the north pasture. Marlene, Wade exclaimed, seeing her galloping toward them. What's happened? She explained the situation rapidly. Wade's expression darkened as he absorbed the news. Cattle thieves, he spat. They've been hitting ranches up north. I didn't think they'd come this far south. He turned to William. Stay with Marlene. Keep the rifle loaded. I can help, William protested. I need you here, Wade insisted. Protect the ranch. Protect Marlene. As Wade mounted up to join the posse, Marlene caught his arm. Be careful. Something fierce and tender flashed in his eyes. He caught her hand, pressing a quick kiss to her knuckles. I'll return, he promised, then rode away at a gallop. The next 24 hours were the longest of Marlene's life. She and William took turns standing watch, jumping at every sound. By evening, dark clouds had gathered, and rain pounded the roof of the ranch house. "They'll have to seek shelter," William fretted, pacing the floor despite his crutch. "The posse won't be able to track in this weather." "Your brother knows these lands," Marlene reminded him, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "He'll be safe." Around midnight, hoofbeats approached through the rain. William grabbed the rifle while Marlene peered through the window. "It's Wade," she cried, flinging open the door. He stumbled in, soaked to the skin and exhausted. A dark stain spread across his left shoulder. "You're hurt," Marlene gasped, helping him to a chair. "Bullet grazed me," Wade explained, his voice rough. "We caught the thieves at Blackwater Canyon. Marshall's taking them to the territorial prison." Marlene was already gathering supplies to treat his wound. "William, heat water. And fetch the whiskey." Wade submitted to her care without protest, wincing only slightly as she cleaned and bandaged the wound. Her hands were steady despite her fear. "You're good at this," he observed, watching her work. "My mother was often ill," she explained. "I learned to tend wounds and fevers early." When she finished, Wade caught her hand. "Thank you." William, sensing the moment between them, made an excuse about checking the horses and left despite the rain. "I was afraid," Marlene admitted once they were alone, "when I saw you wounded." "It made me realize something too," Wade said, his voice low. "When those bullets were flying, all I could think about was getting back to you. Not the ranch, not the cattle. You." Marlene's breath caught. Wade stood, towering over her, his eyes intent. "I don't need more time," she whispered. "My answer is yes." The kiss that followed was gentle at first, then deepened with hunger and relief. When they broke apart, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected this," he confessed. "When I placed that advertisement, I thought I needed a housekeeper, a partner for practical reasons. I never imagined that you'd find love," Marlene finished. "That I'd find you," he corrected. They were married the following Sunday by the traveling preacher. The ceremony was simple, attended by William, Helen Turner and her husband, and a few neighbors who'd overcome their initial suspicion of the Eastern bride. Marlene wore a new dress of ivory muslin that Wade had ridden 30 miles to purchase from the nearest town with a proper store. As she spoke her vows, she thought of the newspaper advertisement that had changed her life and the many voices that had called her a fool for answering it. At the small reception afterward, Helen pulled her aside. "Well, Mrs. Quinn, it seems you knew what you were doing after all." Marlene smiled, watching Wade laugh with his brother across the room. "Sometimes the greatest risks bring the greatest rewards." "You've changed him," Helen observed. "He's lighter somehow." Later that evening, as wedding guests departed, William announced he would be staying with the Turners for a few days to give the newlyweds privacy. His wink made both Marlene and Wade blush. Alone at last, Wade led Marlene onto the porch to watch the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson. His arm around her waist, he pulled her close. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "Not one," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "You know what Henderson said to me in town yesterday?" Wade mentioned, a smile playing at his lips. "What's that?" "He said I was the luckiest fool in Montana, finding a bride like you from a newspaper advertisement." Wade turned to face her, framing her face with his calloused hands. "I told him you're the only bride I ever needed." In the years that followed, the Quinn ranch prospered. Wade and Marlene added rooms to the house as their family grew, first with a daughter, then twin boys who inherited their father's strength and their mother's determination. William married Helen Turner's younger sister and built his own cabin on the property, becoming a skilled leather worker despite his disability. Occasionally, Marlene would take out the faded newspaper clipping that had brought her west and marvel at how her greatest risk had become her greatest blessing. The words that had once seemed so impersonal, "Rancher seeks bride," had led her to a love deeper than she'd ever imagined possible. On their 5th anniversary, Wade presented her with a journal bound in soft leather. Inside, he'd written a single line on the first page: "To my wife, who was brave enough to answer an advertisement and foolish enough to marry a man who didn't know he needed her until she arrived. I was never a fool," Marlene told him that night as they sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching their children play in the yard. "I knew what I was looking for, even if I didn't know I'd find it with you." Wade pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Then we're both fortunate that fate brought us together." "Not fate," Marlene corrected with a smile. "A newspaper advertisement and the courage to take a chance on an unknown future." As the sun set over the Montana prairie, painting the land they'd built together in gold, Marlene Quinn knew that sometimes what appears to be foolishness to others is actually the wisdom of a heart seeking its home.